Welcome back to National Report as you take a live look here in Khan Yunis, Gaza, where hostage negotiations have reportedly soured. Hamas saying it's suspending talks with Israel over hostages taken into the Gaza Strip. The terror group claiming it's because of Israeli attacks on the Gaza Strip's largest hospital, Al-Shifa.
Israeli military officials have denied deliberately targeting Al-Shifa, the hospital, but stating that there were clashes with Hamas militants surrounding it. Hamas fighters are routinely accused of deliberately hiding behind mosques and schools and, yes, hospitals as well, often storing weapons there, so that any attack by Israel, again on that, something like a warehouse or a weapons warehouse or where they're keeping, appears to be an attack on civilians. This comes as Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu went on television over the weekend saying no ceasefire is possible until all hostages are released. Ron Estes is a Kansas congressman joining us live in studio. Congressman, good to see you, and thank you so much for coming on. We appreciate that. And this talk about, again, this element of the war, the hostages, is such a sensitive topic. And, you know, around the major cities, you're seeing the posters of who these people are, their family members, and you're talking young babies, you're talking the elderly, but 240 plus. We're learning that they're from all different religions, not just Jews that are held right now. And then you've seen this rise in anti-Semitism and ripping them down, and the censure vote that you obviously were part of there in the House that you've seen for Wichita Tlaib and her remarks. What do you see today?
Yeah, I think it's unfortunate. I mean, Hamas was indiscriminate in terms of the people they took hostages, and we're seeing now the consequences of that. As you said, it wasn't just Israelis, it was Americans and citizens from other countries as well. And just some of the atrocities that they committed while they were there. And it's unfortunate that the message hasn't gotten through. Maybe it's our education system in the United States. We need to make sure that we talk about the whole range of the truth and not some of the thought process that people are talking about now in terms of trying to say that Israel should pull back and do a ceasefire when these hostages are still being held, and we just don't know what's being done to them.
What's it like to serve alongside members of Congress who have not voted to designate Hamas and call them out and put them at blame for what transpired on October 7th?
Yeah. You know, we always have differences of opinion on different policy and what to do, but it really is disheartening to think about there are Americans and people in leadership positions in America who actually won't stand up for American values, won't stand up for democracy around the world, and instead are out actually advocating the death of a country and supporting groups that actually advocate not just for Israel, but also, you know, talking about death to Americans.
Talk to us a little bit about aid to Israel, if you can. This has been a major topic, keeping the government open, funding for Ukraine, funding for Israel. You serve on the Budget Committee in the House of Ways and Means Committee. Can you talk to us about that in terms of what you've seen? The president had his proposal. He sends it over, $106 billion in aid, wants Ukraine money, wants Israel money, again, for both wars. But then the House comes up with your own version and says, hey, here's one with Israel aid in it, more than $14 billion. There seems to be a disagreement with the Senate on it, the president not necessarily on board with it, at least is what we know so far. How will this play out? Aid to Israel, funding the government, keeping it open, and then you've got a new speaker in the House that's trying to navigate this with the conference.
Yeah, and you know, it's so important. I mean, we thought it was important to move quickly and decisively to support Israel. Just seeing the atrocities that Hamas committed there. And that's why we wanted to make sure that it didn't get caught up in politics, that we just focused on how do we move forward with Israel. And that the other aspect of that is we wanted to make sure that we can't just continue to put extra spending on the credit card. And that's why we looked at an offset and to make sure that we don't expand the debt, which is already too high as it is. And so we wanted to focus on making that happen. The other piece is that there's some concern. Obviously, Ukraine's a longer issue that's out there, and there's some very valid concern. And the administration hasn't been very forthright in terms of talking about how the money that they've spent already. And so we wanted to make sure that we were quick and move through with Israel and support there. And that was our goal. That was our approach.
Yeah, and again, House Republicans with the majority were able to get that across. Again, who knows what's going to happen in the Senate? The White House obviously doesn't seem on board with just the Israel standalone funding. But we've got a deadline coming up, and that's this Friday, on whether or not the government shuts down. What's your read on whether or not it's funded.
Yeah. Speaker Johnson has come on board. He's really got a lot of issues in front of him to address. He's a good, solid Christian man and focusing on trying to get those addressed. But 2023 is a tipping point. We actually borrowed more money this year than we actually spent on the 12 appropriations process. So that's a dynamic that we've got to start addressing. And the speaker's brought forth an approach to focus on that. What we don't want to have happen is that get our backs against the wall on Christmas and the New Year's and have some big bloated omnibus come through and spend all this excess money when we're already in an issue of borrowing more than we're currently bringing in tax revenues. So we want to make sure we focus on getting that through the process. The speaker's brought forth a novel approach of let's do a split continuing resolution so that we can focus on 4 bills, get 4 appropriations bills done, and pass through the Senate as well. I mean, the House has done 7 bills. We're waiting on the Senate now.
I know you're going to be heading back to D.C. soon. Before you go, I wanted to show the viewers here an op-ed that you recently wrote titled "Biden's Election Gimmick Undercut National Security," where you accused the president of tapping into the Strategic Petroleum Reserve purely for political gain. Can you explain that to the viewers and why you thought, hey, I want to get this message out?
Yeah. The Strategic Petroleum Reserve was created after the oil embargo from OPEC back in the 1970s. And the whole concept was when there's a world crisis and the threat of oil being shut off, we wanted to make sure we had a supply in the United States. It wasn't for election year gimmicks, which is what the president did last year in terms of releasing some of that to kind of offset the high prices that he had caused through that. And then when we had the crisis last year with Russia invading Ukraine, and now we've got the Hamas's attack on Israel, those are legitimate situations where Iran could come back and say, we're not going to ship any more oil around the world, and the United States will be at risk, and consumers will pay the price.
Or only sell to China.
And so what President Biden's done is weakened America, and by taking our strategic reserve, sold it, and actually sold a lot of it to China through that process.
It's good to have some just in the bank, essentially, just in case you would need to tap into that.
It literally is, yes.
And again, calling him out for that. Congressman Estes joining us in studio. We appreciate it, sir. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much.